All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. Let us begin. A lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. We are nearing the end of Maseches Megillah. It's just incredible. It's just incredible. You know, sometimes you think you have, like when you get together with family or with friends you haven't seen for a long time. So you get together and Baruch Hashem, like you have a whole weekend together, a whole Shabbat together, a whole week together. You're so excited because, so much time. And then the visit is coming to an end. And you say to yourself, where did all the time go? It just feels like we started Maseches Megillah just yesterday, and so much time with a beautiful, trusted, wonderful friend. And now again, where did all the time go? Where did all the time go? I will say, okay, but we still have 2 more days in Yirtzeh Hashem. You could acquire eternity in 1 moment. Imagine what we could do in 2 days. All right, I will say, so with that, today's Daf is Lamed Aleph 31. And we are picking up in Yirtzeh Hashem on Daf Lamed Amud Beis 30b at the Mishnah. So we're also continuing a little bit in some of the sugyas concerning Kriyas Torah. So we left off at the Mishnah, right? We got off to the Mishnah? Yeah, good. Mishnah. B'Pesach Korin b'Parshas Moados Shal Toras Kanim. So we'll say on Pesach, we read from the section concerning the Yomim Tovim in Chumash Vayikra. If you look at Rashi says there, Parshas Moados Shal Toras Kanim, Shar O Kesef O Eiz, Ubiyom HaKam. So good. So we read in the section of the Moados of the Yomim Tovim in Chumash Vayikra. It's Ba'at Seres on Shavuos. We read the section of Shiva Shavuos. We read the section in the Torah that details Shiva Shavuos, that details again the reading of on Shavuos we deal with the section that deals with the halachos of Shavuos. But Rosh Hashanah, B'chodesh Hashvi, on Rosh Hashanah we go ahead and we speak about again the 7th month. Once again, the Kriya related to Rosh Hashanah. B'chodesh Hashvi B'echad l'chodesh, B'yom Kippurim Achrei Mos. On Yom Kippur, read the section of Achrei Mos, which I will say again is Parshas Achrei Mos, which details the Avodah of Yom Kippur. The Yom Tov Rishon Shachag, on the first day of Sukkot, Kolrin beParshas Moados Shebetoras Kanim, we once again read the section of the Yomim Tovim in Chumash Vayikra, Ubishar Kol Yemos Hachag, and once we read on the rest of the days of Sukkot, Bikarbanos Hachag, we read of the various karbanos, the various sacrificial offerings that are brought over the course of Sukkot. B'Chanukah b'Nesim, on Chanukah we read on a section of the Nesim. Now look at Rashi. Now this has to do again over here the Nesim's offerings for the Chanukas HaMizbeach, right? It's Parshas Naso. We read again of all the offerings of the tribal princes when they dedicated the Mizbeach in the Mishkan in the desert. Now, what's the connection between the dedication of the Mizbeach and the Yom Tov of Chanukah? So Rashi here points out over here, 3 lines up from the bottom, B'Chanukas HaNesim, Dahavi Nami Chanukas HaMizbeach. So also I say, interestingly enough, remember that Chanukah itself was a rededication of the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, again, it makes sense to go ahead and read about the dedication of the Mizbeach on Chanukah. And there's another piece to this as well, which is that the actual Chanukas HaMizbeach took place during the calendrical dates of Chanukah as well. So because of that, again, the Kriya for Chanukah is the dedication of the Mizbeach. Beautiful. So then we're Purim Vayavo Amalek. On Purim we read the section of Vayavo Amalek, which will say Parshas B'Shalach is talking about again the section of Amalek coming to war with Klal Yisrael. This week's parsha, right? Ultimately, again, Amalek coming to war with Klal Yisrael when we left Egypt. Berashei Chadashim or Berashei Chadshechem. On Rosh Chodesh, we read the section of Berashei Chadshechem on Rosh Chodesh. B'Ma'amados b'Maaseh Bereishis. So this we dealt with this extensively in Maseches Tainis. And we're actually going to make reference to it again today. That on the Ma'amados. So remember again, the Ma'amados is, remember, we had 24 shifts. Each of those shifts in the Beis HaMikdash were comprised of Kohanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. At least based on the opinion of Rashi and Maseches Tainis, there are some Yisraelim who ascended up to the Beis HaMikdash, but the majority of them stayed in their towns and really met in some central locations. Most central amongst them was the city of Yericho. And remember again, they would have this whole service each and every day on behalf of Klal Yisrael for the acceptance of their karbanos. Those were called the Ma'amados. And part of the service of the Ma'amados was a daily reading in Maaseh Bereishis. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says over here, Actually, we're not going to go through it, but Rashi, you'll take a look at the last Rashi in the Daf. He goes through what they read on each of the days of the Ma'amodos, which we already covered in Maseches Tainis. Good b'Ta'anios, on fast days, public fast days, top of Lamed Aleph, Brachos uklalos. So I will say they would read the sections of Brachos uklalos. I will say Parshas Bichul Kosai. They would read literally again the Tochacha. Now, what's the pshat of reading the Tochacha on Tanios, on fast days? So also, if you take a look at Rashi on Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, Rashi says as follows: Brachos uklalos de'im bechukosai lehodia shal iske hachit ba paranos laolam v'yachsuru b'tshuva v'yinatzlu mitzara shemis anan alen. So we'll say it's actually a very interesting idea. Parashas bechukosai follows a very simple model. The model of bechukosai is im bechukosai telechem u'sasai tishmoru. If you do the right things, good things, brachos, will occur. And if you chas v'shalom do the wrong things, bad things will occur. So we'll say this goes back to the motif that we started to express yesterday, which is when bad things happen, the first thing a person has to do is introspect. Right now, again, I'm going to keep saying it again because it's so important. A person should not therefore come to the conclusion that every bad thing that happens to me, or every bad thing that happens to a community, is a result of something terrible that we've done. Because remember again, sometimes that's not true. Sometimes bad things happen not because of any particular iniquity or shortcoming or sin of the individual or their community. Sometimes there are greater cheshbonos. That being said, my response to setback has to be introspection. This is what we saw this yesterday. This is true on an individual level, and this is true on a communal level. That's why on public fast days, we read the Tochacha. We read the series of curses. Because in that Parsha B'chul Kosai, Kadosh Baruch Hu sets the model. The world reacts to you. The world is your reflection. Right? The world is your reflection. So the world reacts to you based on how you behaved. At least that's how it works on a very simplistic model. So if the world is reacting to me in a negative way, I have to ask myself, what am I doing? What am I doing? Let's say, I'll just point out very, very quickly, because we don't really have time for this, but I just want to point out how incredibly important, like theologically, this is. When bad things happen, often the reaction is deflection, right? Something went wrong. Whose fault is this? What happened? And the Torah Kedosha teaches us that's not the way the Yid addresses adversity. The way a Jew kind of confronts adversity is, the first step is, I'm going to own this. What went wrong? Well, what did I do? What's my part in this? Did I have a chelik in this? Right? And if I had a chelik in this, if somehow my actions brought this on, then that, by the way, that's good news. Why is that good news? Because if my actions brought this on, then what? Then potentially course-correcting activity could also change this. You see, so often we like to deflect. We're so afraid in life to take responsibility for things go wrong because I don't want it to be my fault. And what we don't realize is, the great irony is, the best thing in the world is if it's my fault. Because if it's my fault, then I could fix it, right? Rabbi Nachman says so beautifully, if you believe that sheyesh lecha koach listar, if you believe that you have the power to destroy, then believe that you have the power to build. It's the most incredible thing. We spend so much time deflecting blame onto everyone and everything for the things that go wrong in life. And meanwhile, if it's someone else's fault, that means I'm powerless to fix it. But if it's my fault, as painful as it is sometimes to take responsibility for the things that go wrong in life, but if I broke it, I could fix it. And wow, what an empowering idea. And therefore, again, on Ta'anios, on public fast days, you're only having public fast days, right? Nobody's declaring public fast days. You know what? Things are really going great. Let's declare a public fast day out of gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? You're only declaring public fast days when things are going really, really wrong. And therefore, again, the Mishnah says, read Bichul Kosai, because Bichul Kosai says, own it. Now, sometimes I introspect, and I really, it's not me. And sometimes it's not me. Sometimes things go wrong for a whole variety of different reasons. But Lamaisa, the first step in addressing adversity and setback is introspection and ownership. Let me own it. I want to own it. I want it to be me, as strange as that sounds, because if I broke it, then I have the ability to fix it. Say mafsikim aklalos ela echad koreis kulan. Shabbos says a very, very profound Gemara. So ultimately, again, in mafsikin. We'll discuss this more. In mafsikin baklalos. So I'll say, whenever you're reading in the Torah, klavos, curses, you never stop an aliyah in the middle of curses. So rather, what happens? Ela echad koreis kulan. Rather, I'll say you just have one ola. We do this today, right? In Parshas Bechukosai, we do not break up two aliyahs, right? Can you imagine the guy going up? Listen, you got klalos. Right, you got close, right? You know why. You know why. We both know why, right? We don't do that. In fact, again today, our minhag, interestingly enough, is that the Baal Koreh just gets that aliyah. Some kilos actually the minhag was that they would call up the Rav. That is not our minhag over here, right? The idea was that same way we don't want to dafka call someone up for the klalos. We also don't want to go ahead and kind of stop an aliyah in the middle, because then you have two aliyahs of klalos. Rather, just read it. Rashi says over here, "Imav sigim klalos kid mefarish milsa she'ein shnaim korin bahen ela achad koreis kulan u'shnaim harishon korbash." Good. So I will say the idea over here is you do it as one aliyah. B'sheni v'chamishi b'shabis u'mincha korin kisidron ve'in odin lahem mina cheshbon. So let's listen to this. On Mondays and Thursdays and Shabbos mincha, we read the normal Parshas HaShavua, but they don't count towards the total tally. I will say, what do I mean by that? You see, you might have felt like this. Think of this just a moment. Well, Monday, Thursday, or I should say Shabbos Mincha, Monday, Thursday, you're already reading the first Aliyah, so therefore, where should you start on the following Shabbos? Think about this, right? So last week already Shabbos Mincha, we read Parshas B'Shalach. Monday, we read Parshas B'Shalach. Thursday, we're going to read the first Aliyah, Parshas B'Shalach. So where should we start on Shabbos? Where should we start on Shabbos? Sheni. Start by Sheni. No, it doesn't work that way. Although we're reading the same reading on Shabbos Mincha, Monday, Thursday, Eino Olam Min HaMinyan. They don't count towards the collective obligation to read the Parshas HaShavua. Therefore, Shabbos morning, we will begin from the beginning of Parshas B'Shalach. Sheneh Amar, as the Pasuk says, V'aydaber Moshe es Moadei Hashem el Bnei Yisrael. Moshe spoke out about the Moadei Hashem, the holy convocations of Hashem to Bnei Yisrael, mitzvahs and shukorin kol echad ve'echad bizmano. Now, we'll say this last pasuk is actually not going on the statement before, but rather it's going on the previous part of the Mishnah. Because we'll say, what has been our theme up until now? Kriyas HaTorah always reflects the identity of the day. Right? We don't just stam read a section of the Torah on a particular day, but rather, again, the Kriya always reflects the unique identity and nature of the day. Where do we get that idea from? That you're supposed to have a Kriya that reflects the identity of the day, based on this pasuk. Vaydaber Moshe Moadei Hashem al Bnei Yisrael, that Moshe Rabbeinu ultimately said to Klal Yisrael that on every Yom Tiv, read a Torah reading, read a Kriya that is associated with the identity of that particular Yom Tiv. Beautiful. So we'll say, let's analyze a bit. It says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, Bepesach Korim Parshas Moados, Umaftirim, Bepesach Gilgal, San Yom Tiv Pesach. We read ultimately again the section of Pesach, right? It's what we call Parshas Modos, Parshas Pinchas, right? The section ultimately again detailing Yomim Tovim, and the Haftorah is Pesach Gilgal, which I will say was the Pesach that was celebrated when Yoshua brought. Remember again, Gilgal was one of the first stops when we entered into Eretz Yisrael. And it was the first time that we celebrated Pesach in many years, right? Because in the desert they did not do this every year. So ultimately we read the Haftorah Pesach Gilgal, Va'ina Deika Yomi, and now that we have 2 days Pesach, in other words, now in Gavus, when we have 2 days Pesach, Yom HaKama Pesach Gilgal. The first day we'll do the Haftorah of Pesach Gilgal, Ulamasar Pesach Yoshio, and on day number 2 we'll ultimately again we'll read about the Karban Pesach offered up in the days of Yoshio, which is actually the last Karban Pesach offered up before the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Ushar Yemos HaPesach, and the rest of the days of Pesach, Melaket v'korei mi'inyano shel Pesach. We do a potpourri of kriyas, right? Melaket v'korei. We do a collection of different kriyas, each of them related to the Yom Tov of Pesach. Maihi and Rav Papa says, how do you remember the mnemonic? The Gemara says, Mapo. So Rabbi said, Mapo is just an abbreviation ultimately for the Kriyas HaPesach. And we look at Rashi says, Shar Kalimos HaPesach Siman Mapo, Mishchu Ukichu Lachamtzon, In Kesef Talvei Asami, Psal Lecha, Vaydaber Shabal Oscha. So we'll say, so again, this is the way to remember ultimately again the different readings of the days of Pesach. So the Gemara says, Simen, Yom Tov Achron Shal Pesach. What do we read on the last day of Pesach? Korin Vayhi B'Shalach. Isn't this incredible? Isn't this incredible? What do we read on the last day of Pesach? B'Shalach. Parashas HaShavua. Parashas. Incredible. I don't know. It's just astounding. It's just absolutely astounding. How does this happen? How does this happen? This daf couldn't have been a week earlier, a week later. Dafka the week of Parashas B'Shalach. We get a reference. We get a reference to Parashas Shavua. I both say it's incredible. I can always say it's the Ribono Shalom. These are the things where HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us a little kiss on the head, a little embrace, and says, "I love you so much. Thank you so much for learning my Torah." And just to show you, see, sometimes I both say you wonder to yourself. Let's be honest. Sometimes you wonder, "Come on, is this worth it? Is this worth it?" I'm perpetually exhausted. Can't remember the last time that I felt rested. Right? The last time that I could not lay down on any given open space and fall into a deep sleep. Any time of the day. At any time of the day. Anyone's really I don't know, I could catch this one online. There's an 8-minute daf, a 5-minute daf, a 4-minute daf, right? I could catch all this stuff, right? Is it really worth getting, and again, those are all wonderful. I'm not, all wonderful. In other words, there's so many wonderful things I could do. Do I have to and I say, then you see a Gemara like this, and what happens? So also you begin to see Kadosh Baruch Hu saying, wow, absolutely, you're doing the right thing. Look at this. I'll give you a Parshas B'Shalach. Right on the Wednesday of the week of Parshas. Absolutely amazing. So let's say the Gemara goes, right. So Vayi B'Shalach. And again, I want to be clear. And my point over here was not this shir l'me'ute, anything else. Any shir is wonderful. Anything you do is wonderful. But sometimes, again, we just wonder to ourselves, at the end of the day, is the sacrifice worth it? Because it is a sacrifice. Especially, again, if you're learning the daf early in the morning. It's a huge sacrifice. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I love you. And thank you so much for coming every single day. And the proof that I love you, the proof that it's so meaningful to me, ultimately, again, is this little nugget, a little inyone diyoma, Parshas B'Shalach, on the week of B'Shalach. So the Gemara says as follows, Vahi B'Shalach u'maftirin, vayidaber David. And ultimately, again, the Haftorah is Vayidaber David. So the Gemara says over here, both say, what's Vayidaber David? Vayidaber David is Shiras David. Right? The Shira of David HaMelech. Ulamachar. The next day, what do we read? Kala Bechar. Umaftirin Od Hayom. Amar Abaye V'ha'idna. Nog Alma Lemikre Mashach Torah. Kadesh Bekaspa. Psal Bamidbara, Shalach Bukhra. So we'll say these are all just the different Torah readings that we read on each of the days of Yom Tiv. Batzeres, on Shavuos, what do we read? Shiva Shavuos, Umaftirin Bechabakuk. And we'll say on Atzeres, on Shavuos, we read Shiva Shavuos, which is the section ultimately, again, the Torah reading, that speaks about Shiva Shavuos, right? Shiva Shavuos Tisparlecha, count 7 weeks, get up to Shavuos, Umaftirin Bechabakuk. And we go ahead and we do the Haftorah and Chabakuk. Achirim Orim, others say, B'chodesh Hashlishi, Umaftirin B'merkava, Va'idna Di'ika Treyomi. Now that we have 2 days of Shavuos, we both say, so again, referring to the diaspora celebration, Avdinan Kitar Vayu, we actually have both of these readings, Ve'ipcha, but we reverse the order. But Rosh Hashanah, B'chodesh Hashvi'i, on Rosh Hashanah we read the section of B'chodesh Hashvi'i, which again details the reading of Rosh Hashanah, Umaftirin, Haben Yakir li Ephraim. And I both say we read the Haftorah reading of Haben Yakir li Ephraim. And I both say this is actually very interesting. So why is it that we read this Haftorah of Haben Yakir li Ephraim? Rashi says so beautifully, Haben Yakir li Ephraim Mishum Zachar Eskerenu Rachim Arachamenu. Because I both say Klal Yisrael is referred to as the precious son Ephraim. And in that Haftorah, what do we say? Zachar Eskerenu, I will remember you. A reference, of course, or a connection to the Zichronos, the remembrance of Yerushalayim. Rachim arachamenu, and I will have compassion upon you. So Rabbi say again, that compassion is what we seek out on Rosh Hashanah. So beautiful. V'yesh omrim v'Hashem pakad es Sarah umaftirin bechana. And I will say, ultimately, again, others say we read V'Hashem pakad es Sarah, that Hashem remembered Sarah Imenu for childbirth. Umaftirin bechana, and we go ahead and we end off the Haftorah is Shmuel Aleph, the story of Chana, 2 women who were remembered, who were childless and were remembered on Rosh Hashanah. Va'ina deika treyomi, and now that we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, so Yom Kama ki ish omrim Lemachar ve'elokim nisa es Avraham umaftirin haben yakir. Rabbi say the way now this we're familiar with that of course today that we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So what's the kriya? So Rabbi say on the first day of Rosh Hashanah we read Vashem Pakar Sarah. Right on the first day of Rosh Hashanah we read about Sarah Imenu being remembered. She was childless and she was remembered to she was given a child. And the Haftorah we read is the story of Chana Shmuel Aleph. That's what we'll say. If you remember again, that's why. Because again, we saw this Gemara Masechus Rosh Hashanah that ultimately again, Rosh Hashanah nifkida Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Veleah. That ultimately again on Rosh Hashanah all of the imos were remembered. All the imos who were childless were remembered on Rosh Hashanah, and therefore again the Haftorah is Chana, who was also childless and ultimately was remembered for a child on Rosh Hashanah as well. That's the Torah reading Haftorah. On second day, what do we read? Ve'elokim nisas Avraham, the Akedah. The Akedah. We read the story of the Akedah second day of Rosh Hashanah, because again, remember, on Yomim Noram and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we bring up the Zuchos of the Akedah very often. Umaftirin haben yakirli. And we go ahead and we read the Haftarah of haben yakirli for the reasons we just said before. B'Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur, Korin Acharemos. Shavuos on Yom Kippur, read the section of Acharemos. Now that's an easy one. Why Acharemos? Because Acharemos details the avoda of Yom Kippur. Umaftirin kiko Amar Ram Vinisa. And we go ahead and we do the Haftorah in Yeshaya of kiko Amar Ram Vinisa. We'll say, if you look at Rashi says, why do we do this Haftorah? Kiko Amar Ram Vinisa. So has said Ram Vinisa, the God who is high and exalted. And Rashi says, "Va'amar solu sheva midbar midas hatshuva." We'll say the Haftorah itself seeks Hatshuva. That's the topic of the Haftorah, is Tshuva itself, and therefore again that's the Haftorah we read. Ubemincha korin ba'arayas umaftirin beyona. I will say on Mincha, right by Mincha time, we go ahead and read in the section of the Arayas. Also, it's actually interesting, right? The Kriya on Mincha and Yom Kippur is always very interesting, right? Because the Kriya is the section of forbidden relationships. Right? So why do we read this on Mincha Yom Kippur? It's incredible. Why do we read this on Mincha Yom Kippur? So the Gemara, we saw this in Maseches Yuma, because the Gemara says, because most Averos that we commit are centered around Arayas. Pretty profound. That most of the Averos that we struggle with center around morality. Now, I will say, now that doesn't mean that most of the Averos that we commit are those forbidden relationships. Right? Most normal people actually don't commit those forbidden relationships. But the idea is most of the things that we struggle with in life are arayos, are morality related. And therefore, or immorality related. Therefore, the section we read on Mincha of Yom Kippur is a section of the illicit relationships. Umaftir biyona, and of course, the Haftorah by Mincha is Sefer Yona. They both say a beautiful, beautiful Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol makom she'atamotze gvurasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, atamotze an v'senuso. But it's a very profound Gemara. Wherever you see the strength of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you will also see his humility. In other words, Rabbi say, we often think that strength and humility are opposites, right? Where strength is being exhibited, right? That's gevura, right? Gevura, strength is not humility. Yet by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, something amazing happens. Wherever you see the greatest display of his strength, you'll also see the greatest display of his humility. Where do you see this? So the Gemara says, Atamotzi an venus, I'm sorry, Shalach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Atamotzi an venuso davar zeh kasuv batorah. V'shanoi b'neviim, v'shulish b'ksuvim. And this theme is written in the Torah, it's seconded in the Nevi'im, and it's written a third time in the Ksuvim. How so? Here we go. Kasuv batorah, ki Hashem Elokeichem, Hu Elokei Elokim, ve'adonei ha'adonim. Right? Uksiba says, the pasuk says, because Hashem, your God, is the God of gods, the master of all masters. And what does it say right afterwards? It's incredible. Uksiba srei, oseb mishpat yosom v'almana. He does justice. He performs the justice. Oseb mishpat, he carries out justice for the orphan and the widow. So I want to point out something amazing. So why is that? So the Gemara is using this as an example ultimately of what? Where you see the gvura of Hashem, wherever you see the greatness, the strength of Hashem, you see his humility. But this is incredible. How is the humility of the Ribbon Shalom expressed? You see, often what ends up happening is as follows. If a person has gvura, right? So gvura, unfortunately, sometimes leads to gaiva, leads to arrogance.
And how does arrogance most often express itself? Where a person says, this is beneath me. Me, I don't do this kind of stuff. Right? I'm very chashuv, I'm very important. So therefore, again, there are certain things that I'll do, and certain things that I'm just not doing because they're beneath me. The greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, on one hand, you can see the pasuk says, Ki Hashem Elokeichem. Right? The pasuk describes the Ribono Shel Olam as the greatest of the great. The greatest of the great. Dvarim, Perek Yud, pasuk Yud Zayin, and then the very next pasuk says, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals with the widow and the orphan. Let's say, who are the widow and the orphan? Often, they're the most marginalized part of society. So the King of Kings, the greatest of the great, nothing is beneath him. Nothing is beneath the Ribono Shel Olam. That's his humility. Right? All of us have the line, we draw the line. There are certain things, I'm not getting involved in that. I'm not doing that. That's beneath me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nothing is beneath him. Wherever you see the greatest display of strength, that's where you see the greatest humility. I will say that's humility. Humility is when you say to yourself, you know what? If the job has to get done, nothing is beneath me. Nothing is too unimportant. Whatever it is, I'm willing and ready to do that. And that's how the Ribono Shel Olam himself behaves. It's so incredible. V'shani b'Nevi'im, and the same theme is found again in the Nevi'im. What happened in the Nevi'im? Ki kol amaram v'nisa shochin ad v'kadosh uksib asrei v'azdaka v'shafal ruach. So we'll say, it's fascinating, you always see the same theme. Whenever you see these major descriptions of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the next pasuk is, and Hashem is there for the downtrodden and the one who is lowly of spirit. In other words, no one is too unimportant for the Ribono Shel Olam. We'll say, isn't this incredible? Right? So often we do this in life. We have people who will talk to, people who will engage, and the people kind of just, whatever, I don't really engage with that person or that kind of person or this. And yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ribono Shel Olam says, no one is beneath me. So wherever you see his gevura, wherever you see his strength, you see the humility. But I will say again, this is a different kind of humility. This is the kind of humility that says, no one and nothing is too unimportant to have my attention. It's so incredible. Mishlosh b'ksuvim tichsev solu l'rochev ba'aravos beishmo. So again, literally extol the one who goes up, right? Rochev ba'aravos uksib asrei avi yisomim v'dayon almono. So we'll say once again, wherever you see the great gevura of Hashem, you also see his humility. And the humility of the Ribono Shel Olam is expressed. No one is undeserving of his attention. And I will say how much we have to try to emulate this as well. That again, even though each of us has incredible gevura, we each have incredible strength, but we also have to have anava. We also have to have humility. And sometimes that humility is most properly expressed in the willingness to be there and to give time and attention to whoever may need it. Even if it's a person who, quote unquote, is beneath. Right? Even if it's a person who's marginalized, even if a person who's on the periphery, even if it's a person who's not normally in our social circle or living the same lifestyle as we are, so incredibly important. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his gevura, he has his hanava, we have to have our gevura and our hanava as well. Incredible. Yom Tov Rishon Shachag, Korban Parshas Modos, Shavdaras Kohanim. First day of Sukkot we read Parshas Modos and Chumash Vayikra. Umaftirin hine yom ba Hashem va'idna deika trei yomi. And now that we have 2 days of Yom Tiv, meaning in diaspora, lemachar. So the Gemara says lemachar mikra hachanami karinon afturei mai mafterinon. So again, we'll do the same kriya, but ultimately again, what should we do for the Haftorah? Vayikalu el HaMelech Shlomo. So we'll say they'll read the pasuk, they'll read the section of Vayikalu el HaMelech Shlomo, which talks about the building of the Beis HaMikdash, the dedication of the Beis HaMikdash, which ultimately again happened on, Rashi says over here, it's the first line, Vayikalu al Shem Shechanukas Alayis Haisa Ba'osa Asiv B'chag HaSukkos. The Beis HaMikdash itself was dedicated on Sukkos. So therefore again, that'll be the Haftorah. Ushar Kalimos HaChag, the rest of the days of Sukkos. Kard b'karbanos hachag, we read of the various offerings of the Yom Tov of Sukkos. Yom Tov Acharon Koren Kol HaBachar, Mitzvos V'chukim Ubachar. And I will say ultimately again, on the last day of Sukkos, we'll read the section of Kol HaBachar, which goes through again all of the pertinent halachos. If you look at Rashi says over here, Koren Kol HaBachar, Ella Shemaschilin Aser Ta'aser, Lefi Sheyesh Ba'osa Parsha, Mitzvos V'chukim Harbe, Hanoagos B'chag, Ba'osa Zman, Shuzman Asif. So I will say that section of Aser Ta'aser, which right then goes into Kol HaBachar,
ultimately again has many of the halachos that are pertinent to that time of year. What are some of the things that are pertinent to that time of year? Since it's the gathering season, Zman Asif, Shaniyim Tzrichem Lasov, Machal Beisam, Va'od Yesh Ba'osa Parasham Mitzvahs, Ma'aser Ani, Mitzvahs Nason, Titain, Upasoach, Tiftach, Shabosai. There are many of the halachos of tithing, and also many of the halachos of tzedakah, which are pertinent to that time of year, since one is gathering in all of their produce. So says the Gemara, Lemach, good. Umaftirin vayike chalo shlomo. Lemachar korin v'zos habracha. So we'll say Lemachar. Now Lemachar is the last day of Sukkot. The last day of Sukkot. We'll read v'zos habracha, right? Because we finish out the cycle of the Torah. Umaftirin vayamod Moshe. And I will say we do the Haftarah vayamod Shlomo. I will say which is the tefillah ultimately again that Shlomo had at the time that the Beis Hamikdash was sanctified. Amar Ravuna, Amar Rav, Shabbos Chalios B'Chol Shamoed. What about Shabbos Chalamoid? What do you read on Shabbos Chalamoid? So the Gemara says, Shabbos Chalios B'Chol Shamoed, Bein Pesach, Bein Sukkis, Mikra Karinon Re'ei Ata. So I will say ultimately again both Chalamoid Pesach, Chalamoid Sukkis, we read the Kriya of Re'ei Ata. Afture, what about Haftorah? So by Pesach, Hatzamos Yeveshos. So we'll say this is the Hatzamos Yeveshos, the famous, right, the famous Haftorah, the dry bones, Yecheskel, or Besukos, B'yom Ba-Gog. And on Sukkos, ultimately again, B'yom Ba-Gog, the war of Gog Umagog. Rashi says over here, the second line from the bottom, B'yom Ba-Gog, V'hiya Melchama Ha'amura B'Zechariah B'hinei Yom Ba'al Hashem. B'Chanukah B'Nesim, as you said in Mishnah, by Chanukah, we read the Parsha of the Nesim. We'll say, you have to understand something. This Gemara is so incredibly important to see today. Today we don't realize that you want to know what the Kriyas HaTorah is, no problem. What do you do? Right? You can open up the Luach, right? Or you can go ahead and open up the Chumash and you have everything. So again, I will say, remember, how was the Chumash? How was the Luach? Or I say differently, you open up the Shulchan Aruch. So we'll say, this is incredible. Remember again, this is the Luach. Here you see it. This is the original Ezra's Torah Luach. Here it is. It's all here. You open it up and the entire order for the Kriyas here. Chanukah, what do you read? B'Chanukah, so the Gemara says B'Nesim, Umaftirin B'Neros de Zechariah. So we'll say in Chanukah, like we saw before, we read the section of the tribal princes. We use that as the Haftorah, the Neros of Zechariah. We saw this in yesterday's daf. V'Mikloish Te Shabbosos. What if you have two Shabbos Chanukahs? Right, once you can have two Shabbos Chanukahs. So what do you do in that situation like that? Kamaisa B'Neros de Zechariah. The first Shabbos will do the Haftorah of Neros to Zechariah. Basraisa b'Neros to Shlomo. And the second Haftorah will do Neros to Shlomo. Good. B'Purim, what do you read on Purim? Bayava Amalek. B'Rashi Chadashim. So we saw a section of Amalek, war with Amalek. Because again, remember, the Amalek connection to Purim is Haman, is from Amalek. B'Rashi Chadashim, or B'Rashi Chadshechem. On Rosh Chodesh, you're going to read B'Rashi Chadshechem. Rosh Chodesh Chalios b'Shabbos. When Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, Maftirin v'Haya midei Chodesh b'Chadsho. You'll do the Haftorah. V'Haya midei Chodesh b'Chadsho. Chalios be'achad b'Shabbos. Right? Be'esmo Maftirin v'Yomer Yonasan Machra Chodesh. I will say when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Sunday, ultimately again we do the beautiful section of the story of David and Yonasan, Machar Chodesh. Beautiful. Amar Rafuna. Rafuna says as follows. Rosh Chodesh Av, Shechalios b'Shabbos. So we'll say, what happens when Rosh Chodesh Av falls out on Shabbos? What should we do? So Maftirin Chadshechem u'Mo'adechem Sana Nafshi Hayu Alai. So we'll say, so very, very dramatic. So remember again, when Rosh Chodesh Av falls out on Shabbos, obviously the Kriyas HaTorah, the Gemara is not worrying about. Why? We know what the Kriyas HaTorah is. What's the Kriyas HaTorah? Parshas HaShavua, right? And usually going to be right Chumash Devarim, Parshas Devarim, and ultimately again, and the supplemental reading for Rosh Chodesh. They're only asking therefore on the Haftorah, right? What's the Haftorah when Rosh Chodesh Av falls out on Shabbos? So it's going through, I will say, the very moving section from Yeshaya. Chadshechem u'Mo'adechem Sana Nafshi. Literally, again, my soul has despised your Chodesh, your Rosh Chodesh, your Moed. Hayu alai l'torach. Ultimately, again, they have become upon me a burden. The Rebbe Shalom voicing his incredible displeasure with the behaviors of Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says, my hayu alai l'torach. By the way, what does it mean when Hashem says, I will say, it's a very strange pasuk. Chadshechem u'Mo'adechem Sana Nafshi. So the Rebbe Shalom essentially says, I despise your Rosh Chodesh, I despise your Yamim Tovim. Because Baruch Hu is saying that your service of me rings hollow. Rings hollow. But what does it mean when it says, Hayu alay letorach? They have become upon me like a burden. What does that mean? Amra Kodesh Baruch Hu says, so moving. Lo dayin lahem liyisah shechotin lefanai. It's not enough, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that you sin. Ela shematrichen osileda ezo gzera kasha avi alehem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, but you impose upon me the difficulty of trying to figure out how I should punish you. Rabbi said, you see how moving this is? The Ribono Shel Olam wants to do good. Always wants to do good. I will say, we've mentioned this many times. Chazal give a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. And they say that more than the baby wants to nurse from the mother wants to express the milk to her child. In other words, the mother is filled with milk. And she wants to nurse her baby. So that's the metaphor that Chazal give to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael, we're the baby. We want to nurse. We want to receive the bracha. But we don't even realize how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu yearns to give the bracha. He wants to give the bracha. He has so much bracha and he wants to express it. He wants to give it. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, when we do the wrong thing and he has to punish us, not only is it grueling that he has to figure out what punishment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm resentful. Right? It's almost like a human parent. You know, sometimes when you have to discipline your children, so a human parent feels the same way. I'm resentful that you put me in this situation. Right? I love you, my child, so much, and I'm resentful that now you put me in a situation where I have to punish you. I'm resentful of that. Why did you? I love you. I just want to do good by you. Why are you putting me in this position? So the Navi says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has that same level of resentment. I'm resentful of you. It's incredible. I'm not resentful that you sin. I mean, I am resentful that you sin. But I'm resentful that now I have to figure out what the punishment is. This is not what I want to be spending my time on. I want to be giving you bracha. I want to be hugging you. I want to be kissing you. I want to be bringing you close to me. I don't want to be, and I'm resentful. I'll say, this is how much the Ribono Shel Olam loves us. He loves us so much that he's resentful of us when he has to punish us. Who else has HaKadosh Baruch Hu like this, who loves them so much? It's incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. B'Tisha B'Av Gufei Mai Maftir. Now, both on Tisha B'Av itself, what's the Torah? Amarav Eicha Haisa Lezona. So I will say once again, this is not Megillah Seicha, but rather again, this is the Navi Yeshaya, right? Eicha Haisa Lezona. How Klal Yisrael, how Yerushalayim, Kirya Ne'emana, how Yerushalayim has been turned into a harlot. Also, the Gemara says, so Mikra Mai. So I will say, what's the Kriyas HaTorah on Tisha B'Av? So Tanya Achirim Omrim Im Lo Tishmu'uli. Rabbi Yosef Omer Ad Ana Yena'atsuni Ha'am Hazeh Ad Soviyesh Omrim Ad Masai Le'ida Hara Hazah. So we'll say, so three different opinions. Ultimately, again, what's the Kriya? The last opinion ultimately telling us that the Kriya is the parsha of the Meraglim. Since Rabbi say ultimately again, it is the Chet HaMeraglim that kind of carved out the negative dynamic for Tisha B'Av. Amar Abaye, Ha'idna Nog Alma L'Mikri Ki Solid Banim. So I'll say, so now Abaye says the minhag today is that we go ahead and we read the section of Ki Solid Banim Vino Shantem. Right, Ki Solid Banim Vino Shantem. We read this section of Osei, which refers ultimately again to the fact that Klal Yisrael will not follow in the derech of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Umaftirim Asof Asifim. And ultimately, again, the Haftorah that we do is Asof Asifim in the Navi Yirmiyah. Good. So I will say, so we're still continuing on in the Mishnah. But remember again, the Mishnah said, B'ma'amados B'ma'ai Seberesh. So remember again, we saw in the Mishnah that by Ma'amados, we read the section of Ma'aseh Bereishis. So again, we went through this, remember again, in Maseches Tainis, pretty exhaustively, how we explained that on each day of the Ma'amados, they read a separate section of the Genesis narrative. So look how beautiful this Gemara is. Amr Minani Mili. We'll say, how do you know that on the Ma'amados you read from Parashas Bereishis? I will say, this is literally a quote from Maseches Tainis. It's the same Gemara. Amr Rabbi Yami, Mali Ma'amados, were not for the Ma'amados, Lonis Kaimu Shamayim Va'aretz. The earth would not exist. The earth would not exist. I will say, now what this really means is as follows. Were not for the Ma'amados, which guaranteed the success of the Karbanos, the world would not exist. It is the schus of Karbanos, the schus of sacrificial service, which allows the world to endure. Which I will say, by the way, even by itself, is such an incredible use. Well, let's see the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Shneimar, Imlo brisi yomam valayla, chukos shamayim va'aretz lo samti. Right? We're not for the covenant with day and night. The statutes of the heaven and earth lo samti. We're not remain in place. Uksiv vayomer Hashem Elokim b'ma'ida ki irashena. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Avram says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how do I know how I'm going to inherit the land? Amar Avram HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam. Ribono Shel Olam. So the Gemara says, B'ma'ida ki irashena. Amar Avram HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, Shema. Chas v'shalom Yisrael chotim lefanecha v'ata oselahem kedor hamabul or kedor haflaga. So remember again, Avram Avinu gets this incredible promise by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Twofold promise. Number one, a promise of Eretz Yisrael. Number two, a promise of a nation which will endure for eternity. So Avram says to Hashem, a good kasha. You're promising them now eternity because you're doing the right thing. What happens one day when they're not doing the right thing, which is inevitably going to occur? Maybe you're going to destroy them just like you destroyed the Dor HaMabul. Amar lo lav. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, I won't. I promise. Amar lefanav ribono shalom b'ma'ida. Both say, by the way, think about this crazy chutzpah. Right? So Avram says, listen to the conversation. Hashem says, Avram, you're going to be the father of a nation. Your nation will endure for eternity. Avram says, great. How do I know that one day they won't mess up so badly that you're going to destroy them like the Dor HaMabul, generation of the flood? Because Baruch Hu says, I won't. And Avram says, okay, but how do I know? How do I know? Can you imagine this? It's not that, mostly we've all had conversations. It's not that I don't trust you. Right? But ma'id, I will say, by the way, what do you see from here? You see from here that when it comes to Klal Yisrael, you can be chutzpahdik. See, I will say, sometimes when it comes to, for the benefit of your nation, you could be a mechutzaf. Avram did it, Moshe Rabbeinu did it. Now don't try this at home, but l'maisa again, you see how much a person has to advocate on behalf of Klal Yisrael. And you have to sometimes learn to be a little bit of a mechutzaf for the benefit of the Klal. So Avram Avinu said, not that I don't believe you, but can you tell me, how do I know? Like, what's the schus? So Rabbi said, Amar lo, Kadosh Baruch Hu said, by the way, you notice Kadosh Baruch Hu answers Avram. Amar lo, kichali egla mishulesha. So Rabbi said, this is the bris ben absarim. Where Avram Avinu brings multiple animals, right? And the animals are split in half. Where Kadosh Baruch Hu effectively tells Avram Avinu, it is the schus of the karbanos. The schus of karbanos will go ahead and ensure the eternality of your people. So the Gemara says, Amar lefanei Ribono Shel Olam. So I just want to point out, why is it the schus? Think about it just a moment, right? So it's the schus of karbanos, which ultimately go ahead and ensure the eternality of Klal Yisrael. Rabbi says, so I don't know if we spoke this out in Tainus, but it's even if we did, it's kedai to chazir it. Rabbi says, what a profound message. Do you know what ensures the eternality of Klal Yisrael? It's one word: sacrifice. Rabbi says, it is our ability to sacrifice. Now again, here is talking about a literal animal. Rabbi says, you know what it means to sacrifice an animal? You have a flock. Animals are not cheap, right? Animals are expensive. But I take something of my own and I give it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the schus of Klal Yisrael. I think about this. We do this all the time. We do this, right? We educate our children in Torah institutions. It's not cheap. Right? Can you imagine what our lifestyles would be like, Baruch Hashem, if we didn't have tuition? Can you imagine? Right? I see people drifting off now, right? Thinking of, wow, think about that. Do you know what it would be like if we didn't have tuition? Klal Yisrael sacrifices. Do you know how easy life would be if I didn't have to worry about what I ate, or what I looked at, or what I enjoyed, or how I dressed? Can you imagine, how easy? You see, the secret of the Jew is the willingness to sacrifice. That's the secret of the success of the Jew. I sacrifice sleep for the daf. I sacrifice money for tuition. I sacrifice pleasures because I want to have Kedusha in my life and Kedusha in my life. This is the secret of the Jew. It's all about sacrifice. You see, in greater society, sacrifice is a bad word. You're not supposed to sacrifice. You should be able to have everything you want and not have to give. Somebody once told me the golden life, person understands me, the golden life is to have your cake, eat it too, and then have more cake afterwards. That's the person who's mamish serious. That's the golden life. Have your cake, eat it too, and then have more cake afterwards. That's the goal. No, that's not the golden life. Sacrifice is not a bad word. Sacrifice is the best word. Because Rabbi said when you sacrifice for something, it means that you've created a hierarchy of importance in life. When you sacrifice in life, it means that you are goal-oriented. When you sacrifice, it means that you live life with a directed vision. And when you sacrifice in life, it means that there are things, like we saw in Mishnah Yomi, there's an Iker and there's a Tafel. There are things that are important and things that are unimportant. And life is all about actualizing the important things and kind of marginalizing the secondary, unimportant things. Sacrifice is the key to success. And this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling Avraham Avinu. That's fine. That Karbanos play such a pivotal role in the Beis HaMikdash is standing. But what's going to happen when there's no Beis HaMikdash? I will say, Seder Karbanos. Don't worry. Because even when you can't offer Karbanos, what can you do? What can you do? You can say them. You could say Parashas HaKarbanos. Rabbi said it's a beautiful Gemara. So Rabbi say whenever we daven, whenever we say Karbanos, Ma'ala ani alem kilu makriven lefanai karban. And every single time we say Karbanos, it is as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu counts it as if we said, we offered every single carbon. So we'll say again, I know I said this in Tainus, but it bears repetition. Say every single time in the morning, I say the parashios of the Talmud, the Ketores, Ezehu Makoman, which encompasses every single carbon that could be offered. Every single morning, I offer up every single carbon. Every single morning, I offer up again, unless you didn't hear me, every single morning, I offer up every single carbon. So you'll say to yourself, so what? Umochal ani akol avonosehem. And I will forgive them for every single one of their sins. Say the Karbanos. Live a life of sacrifice. I don't mean privation, right? Remember again, we often use sacrifice and privation synonymously. Halavai, we shouldn't have to live a life of privation, right? We should have everything that we need. But even when you have everything that you need, you still have to sacrifice. So also remember again, a person is tempted by a particular temptation, and I choose not to engage it. I choose not to indulge that desire. That's a sacrifice. I'm sacrificing. I'm sacrificing pleasure. I'm sacrificing enjoyment because I want to live a life with some higher good. If I say Karbanos in the morning, and I live Karbanos throughout the day, I live a life of saintly sacrifice, then at the end of HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will forgive you for all of your averos. And this is the secret of the success of Klal Yisrael. We'll stop over here for today. In Meretz Hashem, we're going to pick up tomorrow's daf. Again, I will say we're right on schedule. This is how I pre-planned all of this. Pre-planned the whole thing. I will say Meretz Hashem tomorrow, our last daf, Maseches Megillah. B'Shat Tov Maslachas. Shkayach, everyone.